This video is for anyone who would self-identify as an empath or highly sensitive or even just creative in general. If you relate to any of these terms, the chances are that you grew up in an environment that was unpredictable. It was unsafe. And as a result, your system developed a heightened awareness, a sensitivity to your surroundings in order for you to be able to predict as accurately as possible the chance of danger, the chance of trying to have some control over your environment in any way that you can. Now, if you can relate to that, awareness is like an expansive view. It is being able to notice the patterns all around us and connect the dots. This is creativity. It's connecting the dots from disparate sources and finding ways to make sense of them into something practical in terms of protecting ourselves, right? But awareness is at the opposite end of the spectrum from focus. So again, if you relate to this, you probably have some difficulty staying focused. You are potentially distracted, procrastinate, all of these lovely things. First off, I want to say that that's not a life sentence. Awareness and focus, our systems are meant to be able to flow back and forth between, and it's totally possible to attune yourself to be more focused and more present, and that will actually happen naturally as well. The more that you heal your nervous system and release whatever needs to be released so that you're not on high alert all the time. So first off, I want you to know that's totally possible. And I wanted to share a little bit about what I've learned about this, like the empath and highly sensitive person and the way that we show up in the world, because some really interesting things that have helped me to integrate those traits, because without integration, they can be incredibly harmful to us, where we seem to pick up on the energy of others, take it very personally. We almost like end up like a punching bag, and we just take on everything from everyone else. Okay. Once that's integrated, we can get to a place where we're much better equipped to be able to see the boundary between what actually belongs to us and what actually belongs to someone else. So the first part of it is to realize that as a kid, we are all incredibly impressionable. We will believe whatever anyone says to us because we don't know any differently, right? So all of our parents' projections, we take them all on. So every single person has dealt with this. And so we're all on this scale to some degree. It's just a difference in degree. Okay. And this is an example that I've used a lot in different videos recently, but I'm going to dive into it a bit deeper because it really helps to see how that works from a child's point of view. The example is dad has had a shitty day at work, and he's been feels taken advantage of by his boss, taken for granted. He's really fed up. And as he's coming home, all he can think about doing is slobbing out on the sofa, having a beer, watching a film, right? And as he puts his key in the door and opens the door into the living room, the kids are jumping up and down and screaming, and they're running all over the sofa. And dad feels this frustration rise up inside of him. And he takes that out on the kids. He's like, you kids, you're always doing this. I never get a moment's peace. Dad feels taken for granted. And what he will project out, if he isn't able to process his emotions himself, and if it's an emotionally charged situation, it becomes a lot harder for us to do that ourselves. If he isn't able to do that, he will blame the kids. And from his point of view, it all makes sense. It's totally a reasonable assumption that you could be pissed off because the kids are making loads of noise, right? But as I've said previously, if at that moment that he went to open the door, if you keep everything else the same, if in that exact moment as he opens the door, he suddenly finds out, he gets a text that he's won the lottery, suddenly he's in there and he's jumping on the floor with the kids and they're all screaming and everyone's happy because we're now millionaires. Okay. So it's dad's internal emotional state and his expectation of what he wanted to happen next that influenced the way that he reacted. But from the child's point of view, they don't know all that backstory, and they're unable to differentiate the fact that dad is projecting his emotional state onto them. So in the first instance, the kids, they get blamed and they feel taken for granted. They feel not seen. And that's what gets internalized. Literally, that energy, that emotion that dad couldn't process gets passed on to the kids, right? So as a parent, you have to have really good ways of moving that emotion as quickly and as cleanly as possible whenever you can, because anything that you don't, you're much more likely to project onto the people around you, okay? So if, as an empath or as a highly sensitive person, you would have picked up a lot of these kinds of projections from other people, but you probably didn't develop a strong enough sense of self at any point to really be able to differentiate when that was a projection or when you were to blame. I can relate to this. This was me as well, where people in my life, if they were upset, I took it very personally and I felt in panic mode, like I had to go in and control the situation and fix, right? And you can't help that. That is part and parcel of your upbringing, that is the case. And the thing that has helped me move past that is learning about projection. You know, if we go back to that example that I just shared about dad having all that unprocessed stuff from work, in the moment, he feels justified in blaming the kids, right? The projection, if he's going to pass that emotional energy on to someone else, the projection has to be believable. You know, it's a totally understandable excuse to say the kids were making loads of noise, so I got angry, right? It makes sense. It makes total sense. But our system doesn't work on a level of morals. You know, if you get below the story and you get below the morals, our body is just nature. And so if it has an uncomfortable emotion, it wants to get rid of it, and it is going to try and get rid of it. It is only our conscience, our higher ideals, that hopefully interrupt that attempt to offload that emotion. In the moment when you're triggered and you have too much emotion for you to hold, your system is going to look for any way that it can offload it. And it, like I said, it has to be a believable story to be able to pass it on, you know? If the kids are sitting quietly and dad comes in and says, you kids are always making so much fucking noise, they're going to be like, what the hell is going on right now, right? It doesn't make sense. And so you can only pass on that emotion if the situation that you are in is believable. Now, the other half of this, and you can see it from the point of view of dad as well as for the kids, and you know, this goes back throughout the whole of human history, we all have this to some extent, is an ability to self-soothe. Because what this is, you know, a popular term in therapy and psychology at the moment, and what it really comes down to is an ability to hold your uncomfortable emotions and look at them and process them without projecting them onto other people. And so in that specific moment, dad did not have the capacity to self-soothe his emotions. And what that means really, when you come down to it, is being able to look at the fact that your system is going to try and project to escape the feeling that it doesn't want to hold. If dad is feeling frustrated, he's feeling shame, whatever it is, his system is going to try and offload that. And in the moment, it's going to look for all sorts of excuses just to try and find the most believable opportunity to pass that energy on to someone else. And again, what it takes is an ability to have a higher ideal that you keep in mind, so that when your system does want to react, you have an option to override that impulse. You know, there's nothing more to it than that, right? Your system is going to do whatever it can. But the ability to self-soothe and your ability to interrupt your thoughts really is your level of free will and your level of consciousness, right? So for me recently, I'll give you like a real world example. And again, I've used this on some recent videos. I had a situation where I felt a huge amount of shame related to money. And as I sat there in the moment and I watched what was going on, my mind ran around trying to blame all sorts of different people. And it even went to the place of like, you know, how do I escape this situation? Because this is such a shameful situation. I feel horrible about myself. And it was like, well, maybe I can forge some documents, all sorts of ridiculous reasons and ideas to try and escape feeling this shame that I was feeling, right? And I caught it and I saw it and I was like, wow, that is incredible to see all of that going on in a moment, right? And all of us, our thoughts are just arising on their own, right? I'm not going in there and individually picking these thoughts out. These thoughts are our conditioning and our trauma and our education, all of these things, and they're on autopilot most of the time. And as I said, our free will is only really if we can pause that and question it and then decide whether or not I want to act on it. So I could have tried to blame someone else. I could have tried to forge my bank statements, but I managed to pause it and think, well, how would I show up if I was being the best version of myself? And what I came up with in that moment is the only thing that I can absolutely rely on as solid ground for me to move forward with is for me to share the truth as best I can right now, even if that means massive rejection and me getting dashed on the rocks, right? And so I had to have that higher ideal that, well, I want to free myself of all emotional burden and all baggage and all distortions and lies and anything else, and just lay out the facts of my situation and my experience as clearly as I can, even if things don't go my way. And it required that higher level ideal for me to be aware of how I could react differently. If you don't have an idea of how you could behave in a better way, then you're always going to just respond through those impulses that are out of your control. They're all your conditioning. And especially in an emotionally charged moment, you're going to default to them very quickly. Okay? So, as I say, if you really understand, if you can go and learn about projection and see that anytime anyone is blaming you, anytime anyone is angry with you, anytime anyone is trying to take out some form of negative emotion onto you, it is at some level a projection of what they are internally feeling. That may or may not be something that you did, but those are two separate things that need to be looked at separately. For me, my starting point is always whatever's come in, that's a projection. I can then spend some time, I give myself a bit of distance, and then I try and look at it and see how might I have contributed to this? Is there a way of me repairing this situation? And the same goes the other way. Anytime that I'm thinking of blaming someone else, anytime that I have judgment towards someone else, it is at least in part a projection of the fact that I am uncomfortable or angry or feeling shame or whatever it might be. And if you understand that we are all doing that all the time, for me, we have to stop and reclaim all of that projection and take ownership for all of our blame and all of our negative emotion that we are taking out on someone else, you know, because I can't trust those impulses. Clearly, they are just doing anything to help me escape that discomfort. And it's the same for everyone else. Okay. So our starting point is, I can't trust these thoughts. I'm not going to blame you. I'm going to try and hold them. When you're blaming me, I'm going to do my best to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to distance myself from it and be like, okay, well, this is not my stuff. And then if I can, I'm going to try and orchestrate a conversation where we can look at it a bit more objectively and say, this is what I'm thinking about this situation right now. You know, what are you? And try and do so without having the blame, because I understand that neither of us have a genuine objective view of reality, and we are both projecting all of our shit on each other. Okay. This is such a big topic, and I think it's the most important thing we can be having conversations about right now. I'm going to keep talking about it. If anything is not clear or you have any other questions, please do ask in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.